For 9 years, 9 knights secretly excavated beneath Solomon's temple. They weren't searching for the Holy Grail, they were guarding a forbidden truth so powerful the Vatican would burn an entire order to keep it buried. This is the real story of the Knights Templar. Welcome to Mythic Index, a sanctuary for lost legends and forgotten timelines. Here, we peel back the layers of history to reveal the myths that shaped our world, from the shadows of the underworld to the secrets written in the stars. If you wish to ensure you can always find your way back to this archive, please subscribe now. While the popular story ties the Templars' origin to the Crusades, that narrative is incomplete. The Order's true genesis occurred deep beneath Jerusalem, where it was awakened within the foundations of Solomon's temple. A discovery there completely redefined their destiny, forging a legacy that still reverberates through time. This was no mere military order. It was the revival of a forgotten pact, a truth too volatile for the light of day. When the initial knights arrived in the early 12th century, their objective was not to fight battles or build fortresses. Instead, they vanished under the Temple Mount, the very ground where the great temple once stood. For 9 years, they toiled there in absolute secrecy, their great excavation hidden from the records of popes and kings. They were seeking something more valuable than treasure, a secret from an age before Christianity, sealed away by centuries of neglect and official lies. Whispers claim they found lost scrolls, hidden chambers, and rock-etched symbols that defied the Church's teachings. The men who resurfaced were no longer simple warriors. They were transformed, their purpose altered, and their silence heavy with meaning. They began using ciphers and building with an impossible knowledge because they had found something extraordinary. What they uncovered beneath the temple completely altered the very foundation of their mission. Suddenly, this wasn't about faith. It was about safeguarding a monumental secret, one that traced its origins not to the Vatican, but to King Solomon himself. The true order of the temple was born right there, in those stone corridors deep beneath Jerusalem, recasting them not as defenders of pilgrims, but as keepers of something the world was simply not ready for. In the year 1219, while most people imagined the new Knights Templar were busy on dusty roads protecting pilgrims, the 9 founding members vanished below the city. These were not nameless soldiers. They were the Order's originators, a hand-picked group led by Hugues de Payens and bound together by oaths too ancient to have ever been recorded in writing. For 9 full years, they withdrew from the surface world, making daily journeys down into the labyrinth beneath the Temple Mount. They would return only to rest and confer in quiet whispers. No accounts from this time tell of them fighting battles or securing travel routes, a strange silence that even the chroniclers of the Crusades found peculiar. It seemed their actual purpose had little to do with defending believers, and everything to do with unearthing something hidden for ages under layers of rock and forgotten scripture. All the while, the Church remained quiet, offering no explanation, while the bazaars of Jerusalem buzzed with whispers of peculiar tools being carried into the ruins. Before we drift deep into the ancient past, take a second to tap the like button. Think of it as placing a bookmark in history, helping others find this quiet corner of the internet. Stories spread of scrolls carefully wrapped in velvet, and of parchments bearing foreign symbols that no priest would dare to bless. What could these knights have possibly located to justify such intense secrecy? Some theorize they uncovered fragments of Solomon's own writings, scriptures far older than the Gospels that were guarded by a group known as the Watchers. Another belief points to a vault, sealed in a forgotten age by Masons whose names were lost to history before the first Crusader ever lifted a sword. Regardless of what they truly found, the 9 knights who eventually re-emerged were profoundly transformed men. Their eyes carried the heavy weight of something witnessed, a secret too immense and perilous to be spoken aloud. They had returned not as warriors, but as guardians of a silence that would redefine their order's very core. In less than a generation, this purpose fueled the Templars' ascent to unimaginable influence, earning them papal blessings and the awe of monarchs. The foundation of their incredible power, however, wasn't built on the battlefield, but was forged during those 9 mysterious years beneath the temple's broken stones. Keen observers noted that from that moment on, the Templars were no longer just soldiers of Christ. They had become something else entirely, something more ancient, reborn in the shadows of Jerusalem. Embracing this new purpose, they acted as scholars, venturing into the forgotten corridors beneath the Temple Mount. They pried loose stone slabs and crawled through ancient tunnels, discovering chambers untouched by time. The vaults they found were sealed not with the familiar cross or Latin, but with spirals and star patterns suggesting a wisdom far older than the Church. Inside was no gold or silver, but a greater treasure, scrolls in brittle cloth. Written in languages unknown in Europe, they were filled with diagrams of stars, human anatomy, and sacred geometry. These were not mere relics, they were teachings that challenged the very foundations of Christian doctrine. One text described the temple as a machine for divine alignment, a conduit between earth and heavens operated by mathematics, not prayer. Another hinted at secret bloodlines, where guardianship passed to initiates bound by silence, not through royalty. This knowledge transformed the Knights. Their mission of faith evolved into a deeper calling, forging a secret priesthood that answered not to the Vatican, but to the earth itself. These revelations were never recorded in official Templar chronicles. Instead, they were kept in coded manuscripts, whispered only in inner circles, and protected by the fierce loyalty of men who now saw themselves as heirs to a sacred truth. Their forbidden excavations ignited a knowledge war with Rome. While the Church preached salvation through obedience, the scrolls offered divine connection through understanding, an understanding so feared it had been literally buried. The Templars would carry these secrets back to Europe, hiding them for centuries within their architecture, rituals, and encoded symbols. It all began in the quiet, dust-filled passages beneath Solomon's temple, where 9 knights transformed from soldiers into something more. They emerged as guardians of a prohibited legacy, a knowledge destined to influence empires, create myths, and trouble the Church for centuries. What the Templars possibly discovered, deep below the Temple Mount's foundations, was a prize far more potent than mere gold. Ancient Jewish traditions had long hinted at King Solomon safeguarding profound secrets, a man celebrated for his wisdom even more than his wealth. The stories claimed he had locked away truths considered too overwhelming for ordinary people. Speculation ranged from scrolls of divine science to artifacts able to alter reality itself. The most intimidating tale, however, described a secret vault built by Solomon, its design based on a geometry gifted from angels, and secured by understanding rather than by physical locks. The Templars found themselves stepping directly into this legendary tale. While clearing rubble and charting the subterranean maze, their torchlight illuminated more than empty rooms. They found columns etched with non-Hebrew characters, bearing symbols that merged Egyptian and Phoenician styles with something far more ancient and unfamiliar. They also discovered altars designed to channel energy, not for sacrifice, their placement mirroring the celestial patterns overhead. Eventually, their search led them to the vault. A star inside a circle bordered by interlaced triangles marked its entrance, which was secured by a pressure lock far beyond medieval understanding. Inside, the air felt cold and strangely motionless, as if undisturbed since Solomon's era. The chamber held no gold or jewels. Instead, the knights discovered stone and wooden chests containing parchments and tablets covered in coded inscriptions. This encoded information was a mixture of mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy, but it also contained something more profound. This knowledge hinted that consciousness could be manipulated, focused, and transmitted like a current. These were not the doctrines of any prophet, they were the fundamental laws of the universe, as understood by a king who spoke with God. The awestruck and unnerved knights immediately realized why this was hidden, and why the Church would never permit its release. They were certain they had found the very source of it all. This was a power not handed down from on high, but one drawn from the very building blocks of the universe. A pact, sealed with blood and an oath of absolute silence, was immediately forged. They agreed the knowledge must be copied in secret, studied only within the Order's most hidden halls, and forever concealed from the world. What they had found wasn't just the key to their new mission. It was a force capable of completely unraveling the religious authority of Europe. The Church offered salvation through obedience, but the vault offered power through understanding. This wasn't a simple theological dispute, it was a fundamental challenge, a declaration of war. In that instant, the Templars were no longer just knights defending a faith. They became something entirely different, guardians of a heritage that kings had buried and popes had tried to erase. And the heart of this legacy was a vault so secret its name was only spoken in hushed tones. When the knights finally resurfaced in Europe after spending nearly a decade beneath Jerusalem, they were profoundly changed from the men who had left to guard the pilgrim roads. They returned not just with a new purpose, but with revolutionary new knowledge. In lands where cathedrals had been clunky, functional buildings, the Templars began raising structures that baffled the architects of their day. These warrior monks were suddenly fluent in the language of proportion, celestial alignment, and harmonic resonance. Their mastery of sacred geometry, a discipline long thought lost to antiquity, stunned both master masons and the most learned scholars. This was no abstract theory. Across France, England, and Iberia, Templar chapels began to rise, their designs so advanced they seemed guided by an invisible hand. Vaulted ceilings achieved perfect mathematical ratios, rose windows were crafted to mirror star maps, and entire buildings were oriented to track solstices and equinoxes. Whether at Chartres, Tours, or in forgotten village chapels, their architecture whispered of a knowledge far older than Christianity itself. These men crafted what can only be described as stone resonators, embedding them with symbols and angles that spoke a cosmic language. They appeared to master not just the art of building, but of tuning a space like an instrument, channeling energy through sacred form. Even traditional stonemasons were left baffled, observing how Templar proportions directly mirrored those in ancient Egyptian temples, suggesting a secret lineage of knowledge had somehow leapt across centuries. How could warrior monks possibly know the golden ratio? How could they map stars with such precision, or design with a geometry known only to scholars in Alexandria or Babylon? The silent answer always pointed back to what they had uncovered beneath the Temple Mount. They weren't merely borrowing old techniques, they were reviving an entire philosophy that treated geometry as a divine language. Here, every angle held purpose and every circle a message. This wasn't decoration, it was encryption. Through sacred geometry, the Templars encoded their discoveries, beliefs, and warnings directly into their architecture. The Church couldn't understand these forms, but the Templars didn't build for bishops. They built for initiates, those who could read the secrets in the stone. Solomon's legacy was hidden in plain sight within these structures. Their cross was not just a symbol, it was a key. The buildings themselves were not monuments, but maps. To an outsider, they were beautiful. To the initiated, they were revelations carved from rock. The knights were no longer just guardians. They had become architects of the invisible, carrying forward the mathematics of the sacred, the silence of the vault, and the geometry of the divine. And through every chapel, pillar, and echoing arch, they told a story the Church could not decipher and dared not question. Yet, long before the Templars set foot in Jerusalem, another secretive brotherhood was already walking the dusty paths of the Holy Land. This brotherhood, operating far from the judgment of priests and the reach of Roman law, was known as the Essenes. They were a Jewish sect defined by their withdrawal from society, their strict ascetic practices, and an intense focus on purity, prophecy, and ancient wisdom. Living in isolated communities in the caves near Qumran, they guarded scrolls no temple would dare keep and hand-copied sacred texts, all while speaking of a coming age when light would finally defeat corruption. It's widely believed that the Templars, clandestine digging beneath Solomon's temple, unearthed the very legacy of this group. They supposedly found scrolls tucked into stone jars, manuscripts sealed in clay, and symbols etched onto hidden walls. These markings matched no known Christian or Islamic design, but were strikingly similar to those later found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, a library of forbidden knowledge the Church would deny existed for centuries. The parallels between the two orders soon grew too strong to ignore. Both the Essenes and the Templars lived by rigid codes of secrecy and discipline. Both observed practices of ritual purification, organized themselves into secretive hierarchies, and embraced communal living. Most curiously, both groups centered their existence on protecting a sacred truth, a concept so profound it could not be spoken aloud, only guarded. Some researchers propose the Templars found more than texts. They may have encountered a surviving lineage. A handful of hidden Essene descendants could have passed their teachings down through generations, using whispered traditions and coded signs. This would mean the Templars absorbed a deeper mission, one rooted not in the Crusades but in ancient prophecy. Such an event would explain the profound shift in the order after its 9-year silence, as its public duty to protect pilgrims was quietly replaced by something far older. The Essenes spoke of a teacher of righteousness, a spiritual guide said to hold divine knowledge. As we begin to unravel these lost timelines, leave a comment with the name of the ancient civilization that fascinates you the most. Let's see which era calls to us tonight. Rather than a religious doctrine, some legends say the Templars saw themselves protecting a specific lineage, a bloodline carrying a divine spark that challenged papal authority and reflected the pure essence of ancient Israel. The knowledge they transported back to Europe, whether from surviving texts, relics, or personal encounters, was deeply infused with Essene mysticism. This influence was evident in their rituals, their ciphers, and the very architecture they erected, with the spirit of Qumran pulsing within every stone. To the Church, these ancient connections were profoundly dangerous, suggesting the Templars' true loyalty was not to Rome, but to a much older, untamed power. By aligning with the Essene legacy, the Knights transcended their role as soldiers to become conduits for a hidden current of wisdom. This secret stream flowed from the caves of desert prophets into the naves of their cathedrals, bearing a truth the world was not prepared for. Their initial vow to safeguard pilgrims and secure roads was quietly replaced by a far more ancient and infinitely riskier calling. What the Templars discovered in the ruins under Solomon's temple didn't just inform them, it completely redefined them. Their mission, once devoted to serving Rome, now pulsed with a new rhythm, one that echoed from forgotten scrolls and ancient stone. They found evidence of a covenant never mentioned in church doctrine, a pact predating Christianity itself. This agreement was bound not by the authority of popes or kings, but by sacred duty and knowledge. Templars began to view themselves as custodians of a sacred trust that Solomon himself may have sworn to protect. The texts they uncovered spoke of an agreement between heaven and a select few, a promise tied to sacred geometry, celestial order, and the preservation of a divine lineage. This covenant demanded stewardship over worship, calling for silent guardians to stand against the distortion of sacred truths. Answering this call, the Templars' symbols shifted and their rituals deepened. They stopped fighting for earthly kingdoms, and instead began constructing their commanderies and cathedrals in precise alignment with the stars, encoding their profound secrets into the very fabric of their buildings. While Rome saw them as loyal soldiers, the Knights Templar were secretly becoming something else entirely. They were now the inheritors of a clandestine priesthood, a sacred lineage stretching back to the original builders of the temple and perhaps even further into antiquity. The protection of this profound secret demanded more than just swords. It was shielded by silence, by symbols, and by the very construction of their sacred spaces. Every single stone they laid and each symbol they carved was an act of honoring the ancient covenant that had come to define their existence. This transformation is believed by many to be the true beginning of a hidden war between the Templars and the Church. It was a conflict waged not between armies, but between two opposing narratives. Where the Church preached blind obedience, the covenant demanded deep understanding. While the Church asserted its divine authority through a line of succession, the covenant spoke of achieving divine presence through cosmic alignment and wisdom. These two ideologies could never truly coexist. Deep beneath Jerusalem, the Templars had chosen their path. What truly emerged from those tunnels wasn't a new military order, but the powerful continuation of a mission long buried. Their purpose was now to safeguard a truth they felt the world was not yet prepared to receive. The Templars would go on building, fighting, and serving, but their ultimate allegiance was no longer to Rome. They now served a vow older than Scripture itself, a covenant carved in silence. In the aftermath of their discovery, the Knights bound themselves to this new oath, one that would never be recorded by the Church. This pledge was not to a king or a pope. It was the first seal of silence, a sacred pact that would forever transform the order from a military brotherhood into a living vessel of forbidden knowledge. This pact was far more than a simple vow of silence. It was a fundamental transformation. The initiates who glimpsed Solomon's wisdom instantly recognized its threat, not just to the Church, but to the very foundations of a world order that thrived on ignorance. Releasing their discovery would trigger catastrophic consequences, so the secret needed to be reburied, not back into the earth, but within the very men who found it. The brothers entering this inner circle were marked, not by a brand or a sword, but through profound rituals steeped in ancient symbolism, invoking the spirits of past knowledge keepers. Keeping quiet wasn't just for self-protection, it was for the preservation of truth itself. They transformed into human libraries, each man a guardian of secrets too volatile for any written scroll. Every knight chosen for this sacred trust was meticulously selected, subjected to intense trials, and bound by ritual to communicate their knowledge only through the silent languages of symbolism, architecture, and coded movements. A purposeful split soon formed within the order. The world saw the outer knights, the valiant defenders of cities and pilgrims. But a secret core of inner guardians operated in the shadows, their mission infinitely more intricate. It was these men who journeyed to forgotten ruins, consulted with academics under aliases, and embedded pieces of the vault's wisdom into stone carvings, architectural plans, and sacred geometry. Their entire existence was a dance between shadow and light, cleverly disguising profound truths within beautiful art and enduring myths. Inviolable blood oaths connected them, and the price of betrayal was absolute erasure, a complete removal from both record and memory. Legends even tell of the inner circle maintaining special charts that tracked lineages of initiation, identifying individuals with the innate ability to pass on the wisdom. This was a bloodline defined by spiritual resonance, not royal heritage, and it was handed down through ceremonies the Church would have condemned as heretical. The pact endured because it was a strategy for survival. The Templars understood their treasure was too precious for stone or scrolls. It needed to be encrypted directly into humanity. From that point on, the order evolved beyond a mere army and became a clandestine school of ancient wisdom, transforming them into a brotherhood of guardians who communicated through symbols, sworn to protect a secret so profound that monarchs would commit murder and popes would light pyres just to keep it hidden. Their foundational vow of secrecy was not a temporary measure. It was a sacred pact intended to be passed down through generations. As the knights came back from the Holy Land, their fame preceded them across the continent, prompting a swift reaction from the Church, which veiled its true intentions behind a facade of holy endorsement. Yet, beneath all the official accolades and benedictions lay a deep-seated apprehension and mistrust. Their formal standing was first established by Pope Honorius early in the 12th century, with Pope Innocent later bestowing upon them privileges that were entirely unprecedented. Suddenly, the Templars were exempt from all taxes, held accountable to no earthly monarch, and placed entirely beyond the jurisdiction of local bishops. For the average person, it looked like a wholehearted embrace, as if the Church had elevated these warrior monks to the pinnacle of sacred duty. Behind the closed doors of the Vatican, however, a very different sentiment was taking root. The order's ascent to power was alarmingly rapid, and their profound quietness was even more unsettling. Their fortune grew at a rate that eclipsed the most powerful noble families, while their construction projects displayed an architectural sophistication that went far beyond military experience. This wasn't merely operational discretion. Their silence was deeply theological. Inevitably, stories started to circulate, whispers about unconventional ceremonies, secret manuscripts, and collaborations with intellectuals considered heretics by Rome. Having spent centuries guarding its exclusive authority on all matters of faith, the Vatican could not permit any organization, regardless of its outward loyalty, to hold sacred truths outside of its grasp. The official endorsements from the Pope were not genuine gifts, they were cleverly disguised restraints. The Vatican's strategy was to use its protection as a means of containment, hoping to tether the order's expanding power to religious law. But the Templars, bound by an allegiance that predated Rome itself, navigated these maneuvers with the skill of a seasoned clandestine organization, accepting the special privileges while carefully concealing their true mission. While publicly kneeling at the altars of the Church, the Templars were secretly embedding their true beliefs into the very stone of the cathedrals they helped build. This sacred geometry was a hidden language, a message that only an initiated few could ever hope to decipher. Their relationship with the Church provided the perfect cover, allowing them to perform a masterful balancing act between outward conformity and silent, underlying defiance. For a time, this brilliant deception worked flawlessly. The order amassed incredible wealth and a powerful mystique, all while the Church celebrated them as its own holy champions. Yet, for anyone watching closely, the cracks were beginning to show. These were not men who preached or openly sought recruits. Their leaders were warriors, not priests, and their immense power was rooted in a profound silence, not in passionate sermons. Rome, the great city of authority, had created something it could no longer control, mistaking the order's strategic compliance for genuine submission. In time, the Vatican would be forced to confront a shocking truth. The Templars were not mere soldiers of the cross. They were guardians of a secret so profound, the Church itself could never possess it. The Pope's official blessing was never an act of trust. It was fear, elegantly cloaked in ceremony, a fear that would eventually ignite the flames of a world-shattering betrayal. The order's defining mark, seen by friend and foe alike, was the vibrant red cross emblazoned on their tunics. Publicly, it stood for sacrifice, purity, and unwavering loyalty to God, a symbol the Church eagerly promoted. But woven into its crimson threads was a much deeper, more ancient meaning. This cross was never just an icon. It was a geometric cipher, its design drawn not from Christian doctrine, but from the original blueprints of Solomon's temple. The proportions of its arms mirrored the layout of the temple's inner sanctum, echoing the cardinal alignments used by ancient builders who believed in the divine power of space and form. Even the red hue was deliberate, chosen to match the color of the seal of Melchizedek, a mystical high priest king who existed outside the official priesthood and was connected to a far older, hidden spiritual lineage. Each line of the cross intersected with exact ratios, encoding cosmic principles found not in Scripture, but in the measurements of ancient temples and star charts. To the uninitiated, that crimson emblem was merely a banner of Christian faith. For members of the inner circle, however, it served as a profound statement of their allegiance to a secret truth discovered far beneath Jerusalem. The symbol's meaning was layered. Its horizontal axis stood for the material world, while the vertical axis represented the divine. The very point where these two lines met signified the sacred heart of Solomon's temple, the precise location of the Holy of Holies. An initiate versed in the order's secret lessons could wield this symbol as a key, using it to decode protected documents, identify hidden messages in Templar architecture, and interpret charts designed for later generations. This profound purpose explains the meticulous precision with which the cross was stitched, the care with which it was painted, and the fierce intensity with which it was protected. In essence, the Red Cross functioned as a mobile archive, a visual cipher containing the covenant they vowed to defend. Displayed on stained glass, shields, and stonework, it was more than an emblem of brotherhood. It was a coded message hiding in the open. The official church adopted it as a mark of devotion, but the Knights Templar revered it as a powerful talisman, its energy drawn from a deep connection to the holy geometry of antiquity. It was certainly their emblem, but it was also a reflection of their true purpose, a mirror showing not their master, but their secret knowledge. In an age governed by symbols, where most people saw only the obvious, the Templars moved through society veiled by the very magnitude of their discovery. Each step they took was powered not by simple belief, but by the silent, sacred geometry of a lost temple, pulsing with a truth the wider church remained completely oblivious to. This hidden knowledge was given its most monumental form in Chartres Cathedral, which soars like a prayer in stone above the French landscape. To a casual visitor, it seems to be just one more masterpiece of medieval faith, but concealed within its towering spires and hallowed halls is one of history's most sophisticated architectural puzzles, a stone manuscript that hints at Templar involvement. Chartres boldly deviates from the established architectural traditions of other Gothic cathedrals built during that era, refusing to follow standard medieval blueprints. Its entire construction is based instead on cosmic harmonies, using proportions that reflect the orbits of planets and the alignment of stars, a level of astronomical insight thought lost to time. The precise positioning of its twin towers, its famous labyrinth, and even the design of its stained glass windows reveal an alignment with major celestial events, suggesting its architects were guided by a wisdom that was centuries ahead of their time. The northern tower alone is a marvel of deliberate placement, not just stone. Modern analysis shows its angles are calibrated to the rising of Sirius, a star long identified with divine insight in both Egyptian and Hermetic traditions. An alignment of this nature is highly unlikely to be mere coincidence. Many believe the Templars, with their regional power and connections to the builders, secretly supplied the cathedral's foundational blueprint. The famous labyrinth etched into the floor is far more than a simple Christian symbol. It functions as a cosmic map. Its intricate path is said to mirror the movements of the planets and the stages of ancient initiation ceremonies. At the labyrinth's core, a copper plate once lay, though it has since vanished. Legend claims it bore symbols tied directly to Solomon's temple and the very scrolls found beneath it. Even the crypt below is older than the cathedral, rumored to be built upon a sacred druidic spring, marking the site as a spiritual nexus long before the church was built. This deliberate layering of astronomical precision, complex geometry, and ancient belief systems is no accident. It is the clear signature of an order that deeply understood the power of sacred spaces, symbols, and silence. The Templars may not have branded the walls with their cross, but their philosophy is embedded in the very foundation of Chartres. Their touch is felt in the path of light on solstice mornings, in the acoustic properties of certain chambers that vibrate like instruments, and in the hidden mathematical proportions that signal a profound metaphysical goal. Chartres wasn't constructed simply to impress. It was designed to transmit. It serves as a repository of secrets, much like the vault under Solomon's temple, intended not for reading, but for direct experience. The world believed a lost chapter of biblical history had been found when the Dead Sea Scrolls emerged from caves near Qumran in the mid-20th century. However, for those aware of the Templars' secret mission, the discovery pointed to something far more profound. Hidden within the ancient Hebrew texts and prophecies were symbols, phrases, and cosmological ideas that bore an uncanny resemblance to surviving Templar manuscripts. It was as if these scrolls, penned more than 1,000 years before the order's founding, were speaking in the exact same code. Specific diagrams in the scrolls that showed the divisions of time and the movements of the heavens matched the geometric layouts found in Templar-built chapels. Phrases mentioning the Sons of Light, who guarded the temple's knowledge, echoed language the Templars secretly inscribed in their own rulebooks, never meant for outside eyes. The scrolls also referenced a mysterious teacher of righteousness, a figure whose purpose was revealing divine law preserved from Solomon's time. Researchers now argue this role perfectly mirrors the one assigned to Hugues de Payens within the Templars' earliest initiation rites. Even more intriguing were fragments discussing a temple not made of stone, but of pattern, light, and time. This spiritual structure, a sacred architecture encoded in the stars, could only be built by those who knew the true measures. This idea, though alien to modern religious frameworks, fit perfectly with the Templar fixation on sacred geometry and celestial alignment. It begs the question: had the Templars uncovered documents that aligned directly with what the Essenes preserved? The parallels were too consistent to be coincidence, and while the Church tried to keep the scrolls under scholarly lock and key, it remained silent on the deeper implications. For the Templars, this wasn't a discovery. It was confirmation, a thread of continuity running through time. This continuous thread connected the secret wisdom of Solomon to the dedicated guardianship of the Essenes, and ultimately to the Templars' own sworn pact. The Templars embedded these very same insights within their private libraries, their coded manuscripts, and even the architectural foundations of their structures. Where the Dead Sea Scrolls were protected by simple jars of clay, the Knights preserved the same truths through living rituals, unbreakable oaths, and temples built of stone. While the rest of the world looked upon the scrolls as fascinating artifacts from a bygone era, those initiated into the deeper mysteries understood they were hearing echoes, the reverberations of a timeless wisdom that had never truly disappeared, but was merely waiting for those with the ability to listen. All across Europe, statues of the Black Madonna appeared, tucked away in quiet chapels, cathedral corners, and rural shrines, constantly cloaked in an aura of mystery. Her somber expression and dark complexion stood in stark contrast to the fair-skinned, tranquil virgin celebrated by the Church. While the common person saw her as a strange curiosity, the Templars recognized her as a profound symbol. Her placement within Templar commanderies was entirely deliberate, not a random occurrence or a nod to local traditions. For the Knights, the Black Madonna served as a link to a force much older than Christianity, one that existed beyond religious dogma. Her iconography reflected the ancient goddesses of wisdom, fertility, and secret power, from Egypt's Isis to Mesopotamia's Inanna, divine mothers revered long before the Roman Empire. This dark-skinned maternal figure had always been the keeper of life, transformation, and profound mysteries. Having absorbed the hidden teachings from beneath the Temple Mount, the Templars encoded this ancient symbolism into their reverence for her. Their veneration was not the worship prescribed by the Church. Instead, they honored what she stood for, the divine feminine, a sacred counterpart to the masculine principle that dominated other religious orders. She wasn't simply a different version of Mary. She was the living embodiment of the secret wisdom the Templars had vowed to guard. In the oldest Templar sites, like Chartres and Rocamadour, her statues were purposefully placed over wells or inside vaults, signifying access to a deep source of knowledge, to water, the womb, and memory itself. Nothing about these placements was left to chance. Every location was meticulously chosen, harmonizing with the movements of the stars and the hidden energy flows of the earth, a practice the Templars mastered through sacred geometry. Her dark complexion, so often misinterpreted, was unrelated to sin or foreign origin. It was a representation of the great unknowable. It symbolized the fertile emptiness that gives birth to all life and consciousness. Faced with such mystical interpretations, the official Church would allow her physical image to exist, but could never truly sanction her deeper meaning. In this way, she became a secret concealed in the open, just like the truths the Templars themselves encoded into stone. Traditions whispered within the order's inner circle spoke of the Black Madonna as the guardian of a bloodline, a sacred current of divine feminine power with links to Solomon, the Essenes, and a holy lineage that time had obscured. Whether this was rooted in myth or actual memory, the belief was potent enough to make her worthy of their protection. To the initiates bound by the first seal of silence, she was far more than a simple statue. She was a sentinel, a powerful reminder that divinity was not exclusively masculine, not just fire and the sword, but also the womb and the shadow, intuition and profound stillness. Her presence in Templar churches was itself a quiet act of rebellion against the patriarchal view of the Church. Through her, the Templars kept alive the reverberation of the divine feminine, shielding it in stone and mystery, awaiting the time its message could be reborn not through words, but through a collective awakening. But beyond the layers of relics, rituals, and myths about lost grails, a more startling theory persists. It suggests the Knights Templar were not merely guarding sacred artifacts, but were instead protecting a sacred family line. Secret accounts and coded documents from their inner circle indicate the order held a firm belief that a divine bloodline had outlasted the fall of ancient Israel. This lineage was said to trace its origins back through King Solomon and King David, and perhaps even further to the mysterious figure of Melchizedek. This bloodline wasn't valued for any right to a throne, but for its profound spiritual resonance, a genetic inheritance believed to be connected to an ancient covenant that transcended the faiths of both Judaism and Christianity. The Templars owned discoveries beneath the Temple Mount, where they found scrolls detailing divine architecture and hidden wisdom, were what ultimately shaped this core conviction. Knowledge grows when it is shared. If you know a fellow seeker, or just someone who needs a peaceful escape into the past, feel free to share this video with them. This conviction centered on a lineage with sacred potential, the ability to transmit divine knowledge through blood and body. Their purpose was not worldly power but stewardship. They acted as silent defenders, guardians of a legacy encoded in the human vessel itself. Evidence of this hidden mission lay in the Black Madonna statues, the geometric codes in their architecture, and secret rituals. The Holy Grail legend itself might symbolize this, not a chalice, but a vessel of flesh. A bloodline carrying sacred knowledge that could only be protected, never copied. Whispers suggest the Templars moved this lineage from the Holy Land to Europe, concealing it with strategic marriages, remote settlements, and coded symbols. Obscure families may have carried this ancient covenant for generations. While the Vatican focused on holy wars and relics, the Templars guarded a truth far older and more volatile. This belief redefined their purpose. Silence became essential, not just to avoid persecution, but to shield a truth that could undermine the divine right of every church and monarchy. The concept that divinity was inherited, not bestowed by authority, would shatter the foundation of empires. Therefore, they protected the bloodline like a flame in the wind, in secrecy, shadow, and stone. Though they left no public confession, their actions after Jerusalem reveal a mission far deeper than holy war. They were not knights of conquest, but guardians of memory. They protected a living legacy, not a myth, a bloodline the world was never meant to know. This singular purpose fueled their transformation from a few obscure monks into a major power in less than a generation. Their rapid ascent into one of Europe's most formidable organizations wasn't simply a product of battlefield tactics or the Pope's blessing. A hidden layer of understanding gave them an edge, allowing them to operate with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Their uncanny ability to choose the perfect moment to attack, the ideal location to build, and the right way to steer political events all stemmed from the secret wisdom unearthed far below the Temple of Solomon. While their public mission was to safeguard pilgrims, their true genius was revealed in other ways. They established the world's first dependable international banking network, a revolutionary concept that allowed the wealthy to deposit funds in one country and access them in another, completely upending the financial landscape of medieval Europe. Yet their mastery went far beyond mere economics. The Knights possessed a profound grasp of the planet's energetic grid, strategically erecting their commanderies on ancient power spots and meticulously aligning their architecture with the stars. Consequently, their buildings weren't just places of worship, they were structures designed to vibrate with a specific frequency. This unique quality drew in not just the devout, but also philosophers, visionaries, and master builders who sensed a deeper truth within the stone. Kings and queens sought their strategic advice, nobles trusted them with their fortunes, and even the popes, who technically held authority over them, treated the order with cautious respect. At the heart of this vast network of intelligence and infrastructure remained a secretive inner circle, sworn to uphold the first seal of silence, never breathing a word about their sources of knowledge, the ancient scrolls, the vault, or the sacred lineage they guarded. They masterfully allowed the world to attribute their success to God's favor, when their power truly came from a profound understanding of divine principles. In just 50 years, the order had acquired territory in every significant European kingdom, commanded a powerful navy, and constructed some of the most sophisticated buildings of the age. Their reach extended deep into the fabric of society, shaping royal weddings and influencing laws, all while carefully projecting an outward image of simple servitude. This striking contrast between their humble public persona and their secret, world-shaping mastery was precisely what made the order so unstoppable. They were far more than just soldiers. They were also architects of the future and protectors of the past. Think of them as alchemists, not of metal, but of influence, skillfully converting ancient wisdom into real-world authority. Their ascent seemed like a miracle, but it was a meticulously designed plan. Every step was deliberate, powered by the explosive knowledge they had discovered deep beneath Jerusalem. This newfound wisdom granted them immense power, ushering them into a shadowy world where belief was often a convenient facade, and the real authority came from what you knew. Initially, the Vatican observed its blessed order with a sense of pride. These were their champions, after all, defenders of the faith who erected mighty strongholds for the glory of God. Yet, this feeling of contentment began to curdle into deep suspicion as the years went on. The order was transforming into an entity beyond its original purpose. They traversed the continent as if they were above the law, amassing fortunes, making their own treaties, and communicating in ways the church couldn't decipher. Their local headquarters functioned like independent states. Clergy were barred from their ceremonies, and their sacred imagery carried meanings that lacked Rome's official sanction. The most alarming fact was their total independence. They bowed to no monarch, no bishop, and certainly not to the pope. Quiet conversations started in the halls of the papacy, with cardinals voicing their anxieties. Intelligence reports sketched out a disturbing image. The Templars were operating not as an arm of the church, but as a competing power whose foundations were not in the Bible, but in something far more ancient and mysterious. Everyone knew the Templars possessed secrets. The real source of the Vatican's growing dread was the implication behind those secrets. Rome's authority had long been built on a monopoly over spiritual truth. Yet the Templars hinted at a different way to connect with God, a path that didn't require passing through Rome. This alternative was woven into their precisely designed cathedrals and their overflowing vaults of gold. Their former allegiance was starting to look a lot like passive resistance. The church's entire structure depended on being the one and only gateway to the afterlife. The terrifying question was, had the Knights discovered a secret entrance, one hidden in Jerusalem, documented in ancient texts, and protected by an oath of silence? This was a possibility the papacy simply could not allow, so its watchful eye started to change focus. On the surface, it was business as usual. The church continued to sing the Templars' praises and grant them free reign. However, in private, a calculated plan was taking shape. Letters flew, testing the strength of alliances, while a new breed of inquisitor was being trained. Their mission wasn't to hunt peasants for heresy, but to target threats at the very heart of Christendom. And no threat appeared greater than the Templars. The Vatican began its attack subtly, planting seeds of doubt with rumors of strange rituals and secret idols. Whispers circulated that the order had strayed from the light, a campaign designed to fracture their public image and isolate them from supporters. While the Templars maintained an outward calm, alarm bells were ringing loudly within their inner circle. They knew the church feared what it couldn't control, and even more what it failed to understand. By drifting so far from Rome's shadow, the order had become a mirror reflecting a truth the church refused to see, and that mirror was now cracking. Rome's one-swarm gaze had turned cold. It no longer saw warriors, but silent heretics, and the countdown to confrontation had begun. This brings us to the Scroll of Fire, one of the most controversial artifacts ever linked to the Templars, its existence known only through academic rumor while it remains buried in a private European collection. Legend says it was found in the early 20th century inside a hidden compartment beneath a Templar chapel in southern France. Wrapped in deteriorated animal hide, its text was not Latin, but a hybrid of Hebrew and Aramaic symbols. The brittle parchment bore no title, only a single emblem, a fusion of Solomon's seal and the Templar cross, bisected by a flame. Scholars who allegedly viewed it in secrecy described its contents as disturbing and unlike any other medieval text. It spoke not of battle or doctrine, but of light and transformation. It detailed silent rituals beneath Jerusalem involving sacred geometry, angelic invocations, and diagrams of a radiant temple built from energy, not stone. Central to this was the claim that Solomon's original temple was a machine of divine resonance, built to channel cosmic forces when aligned with specific celestial events. The scroll instructed its reader how to transform oneself into a living temple. This metamorphosis was said to be possible through a careful process involving ritual cleansing, deep contemplation of sacred geometry, and the chanting of secret phrases. Such practices could supposedly unlock a latent power within a person, harmonizing the human form with the cosmic principles that govern the heavens themselves. The manuscript's final section alluded to a clandestine ceremony, performed just once by the Templars' most elite members during their 9th year of digging below the Temple Mount. They were convinced this act had awakened a presence from its slumber deep beneath the foundations, an entity known only as the Voice of Fire. This being, whether a literal force or a powerful metaphor, was described as a protector of the sacred covenant, an existence of pure light and order bound by the primeval pact between the celestial and terrestrial realms. Instead of names or dates, the document was filled with a complex web of symbols, cryptic sequences, and stern warnings. It made a stark claim: only individuals from a specific lineage, those who possessed the internal resonance of the covenant, could endure the ritual unharmed. The scroll's authenticity is still debated in esoteric circles, but its remarkable consistency with other Templar texts and the lore passed down by secret societies is undeniable. If genuine, this scroll of fire might be the last surviving record of forbidden rites conducted deep below Solomon's temple, offering proof of the Templars' secret mission and the ancient energies they believed they had contacted. This document is far more than ink on parchment. It is a whisper from a silent, ancient flame. Beyond the public pageantry that cast the Templars as devout Christian soldiers in white mantles, a different journey awaited. This secret path, concealed from the world, was reserved for a select few chosen by the Order's inner circle. Its purpose was not chivalry or church loyalty, but personal transformation, beginning with a process known as the dual initiation rites. These were no ordinary services. They were profound inductions into an ancient priestly lineage, echoing ceremonies once held by Solomon's priests in the temple's hidden sanctums. After their long excavation, the Templars believed they had unearthed more than just relics. They felt they had reclaimed living traditions from an era when the temple was a nexus point where heaven and earth intersected. The first initiation was a public rite of entry, celebrated with vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. The second, however, was a secret rite performed in silence, deep underground or in chambers aligned with the stars. Its teachings were never written, but passed verbally, fiercely guarded and veiled in symbolism. Initiates would be blindfolded and guided along geometric pathways, representing the soul's pilgrimage from darkness to enlightenment, where they would meditate on sacred symbols. These symbols, carved directly into the stone, drew from a mix of sources, including ancient Hebrew mysticism and Egyptian rites of rebirth. At the ritual's climax, the initiate stood at the center of a sacred diagram, often a version of the flower of life etched into the floor. Here, they were anointed with a mysterious powder of unknown origin, not oil, which was said to awaken the inner senses. A cloaked relic was then presented to the initiate. Its true nature was never discussed outside the rite, but it was believed to be a fragment from the original temple or a representation of the covenant itself. The purpose of this dual path was to separate warrior from priest. A knight might defend the innocent, but only a priest knight could safeguard their knowledge. Those who completed both initiations were given a new name, known only within the inner sanctum, and were forever bound by the first seal of silence. These inner Templars operated as guardians of memory, not land, embedding Solomon's teachings into the stones of the commanderies they designed. The Church was completely unaware of these rituals, and even if it suspected something, it could never pierce their layers of secrecy. To the outer world, the Templars were simply holy warriors. But at their core was a second truth, a sacred duty that spiritually linked them to the ancient temple. It was through these rites that this flame was passed from one soul to the next, an unbroken chain of priests, untouched by time or sword. Beneath the ornate carvings and deep silence of Rosslyn Chapel, tucked away in the Scottish countryside, lies a mystery that refuses to rest. Whispers from historians and mystics speak of a sealed vault, a chamber said to hold the final echoes of the Templar priesthood. From the moment one enters the chapel, it is obvious this is no ordinary Christian sanctuary. Every inch of stone, every curved arch and etched pillar speaks a language lost to time, a language that encodes memory, not dogma. Its most famous feature, the apprentice pillar, twists with floral designs mirroring the tree of life from Kabbalistic tradition, a sacred diagram from Hebrew texts tied to the discoveries beneath the Temple Mount. High above, celestial patterns on the ceiling align with constellations during specific equinoxes, and below the chapel, rumors persist of sealed doors and soundless corridors. While the official church history tales from independent researchers and old Scottish families suggest a deeper purpose, they claim Rosslyn was built not merely to honor God, but to serve as the guardian of a profound legacy. Templar tradition recounts a fleet of ships vanishing from La Rochelle when the order was outlawed in France. It's believed these vessels carried knowledge, not gold, sailing north to find sanctuary with trusted allies. The last stronghold became Rosslyn Chapel, commissioned by William Sinclair, whose ancestry connects directly to those same hidden circles. Its very architecture mimics the proportions of Solomon's temple, with chambers laid out to reflect both celestial and spiritual pathways. Deep below, a hidden, unopened chamber is rumored to hold the order's scrolls, relics, and ritual tools. Some even say it contains a replica of the Holy of Holies, made not for display, but for activation in private ceremonies. Recordings of chants have revealed frequencies in the stonework that resonate with mathematical patterns found in Jerusalem's sacred sites. To those who understand sacred geometry, Rosslyn isn't symbolic, but functional, a coded vessel linking back to the very temple the Templars first excavated. The chapel is a time-locked message, awaiting the right mind or bloodline to decipher it. Every stone, shadow, and carved angel is a puzzle piece of a truth only the initiated can read. Rosslyn was not the end of the Templar legacy, but the sanctuary for its most sacred knowledge. Though its secrets remain silent, Jerusalem still whispers through its walls. Beneath the noise of crusades lies a quieter, more subversive story absent from official records. It is a tale of dialogue, mutual recognition, and a shared reverence for divine mystery. While in the Holy Land, the Templars encountered not just armies but Islamic mystics, the Sufis. These men sought divine union through inner transformation, spoke in symbols, and saw the world as a mirror of the soul, not a battlefield. Among these mystics, the Templars found a strange familiarity. Both groups lived by a code, both kept secrets, and both traced their wisdom to the prophet king, Solomon. To the Sufis, Solomon's legacy depicted him not just as a wise king, but as a master of the jinn who constructed a temple infused with sacred understanding. Sufi poetry portrays him as the ultimate enlightened sovereign, a figure capable of communicating with all living things and possessing the very seal of truth. After discovering remnants of this very tradition during their excavations, the Knights Templar started to see a common thread connecting their own findings with the wisdom of these Islamic mystics. Evidence from the historical record points to ceasefires and correspondence between the two groups, and even occasions where Templar knights protected Sufi academics, a stark contrast to other crusading orders who killed indiscriminately. Obscure and seldom shared narratives claim that certain Templars would secretly attend Sufi meetings, absorbing lessons on God's divine breath, the geometric patterns of the heart, and how holy names manifest throughout reality. Correspondingly, specific Sufi factions started to describe the Templars differently, seeing them not as heretics, but as fellow people of the book who had recalled a piece of forgotten ancient wisdom. This begs the question: were rituals and prayers being exchanged in the secluded parts of Jerusalem, not in conflict, but in a state of harmonious resonance? A number of academics propose that elements of Templar symbolism, especially their use of the octagon, their focus on personal transformation, and number-based codes linked to God's 99 names, show an uncanny similarity to Sufi metaphysics. This connection is likely far more than a simple coincidence. It could signify a profound, hidden link between these two distinct traditions. The Knights Templars' mission wasn't limited to guarding land. They were actively assimilating profound knowledge. While the official church insisted on its own exclusive truth, the order pursued a path of synthesis, collecting wisdom from any source where it could be found. Their bond with the Islamic world had little to do with politics. Its foundations were purely spiritual. As protectors of a secret covenant, the Templars understood that divine truth wasn't confined to a single faith, but was dispersed among all cultures, like stars in the night sky. They discovered in the Sufi mystics a reflection of their own deep, contemplative silence. Consequently, the knowledge they safeguarded in their sacred texts and rituals might extend well beyond the confines of Christian mysticism. It could hold the essence of a long-lost alliance, a common inheritance stemming from Solomon's holy wisdom that once brought East and West together in a language that transcended conflict. Rumors persist, though they are frequently ignored by academics who adhere to the mainstream story, about a trove of ancient books recovered from the temple's subterranean ruins. This was a library of texts that was never inventoried by the Vatican and remained unseen by any official church chronicler. Based on scarce and incomplete reports, these recovered scriptures were not considered spoils of war. Instead, they were carefully maintained archives filled with forbidden wisdom. Their physical forms were varied, with some texts wrapped in treated leather, while others were etched onto hammered copper sheets or written on darkened parchment. These documents bore no resemblance to Christian manuscripts, featuring languages like ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, and Phoenician, along with undeciphered symbols that recalled pictographs from pre-Abrahamic cultures. Rather than laws or genealogies, the books explored cosmologies, metaphysical laws, divine technologies, and rituals that directly contradicted the Church's teachings on linear revelation. Some texts, for example, detailed the vibrational properties inherent in sound and stone. Others outlined concepts of energy flow that have a striking parallel to modern ideas like quantum resonance. One fragment in particular, which Rosicrucian traditions would later reference in code, depicted the human body itself as a temple built from divine geometry, mirroring the design principles of Solomon's original great sanctuary. The Templars, upon this discovery, made the choice not to destroy these works. They hid them, an act driven by profound necessity rather than simple greed. If the contents of these scrolls were ever made public, the authority of both the Church and the Crown would have been fundamentally undermined. These weren't considered heresies, they were seen as keys. To protect them, a secret inner circle, known only by symbolic names, created a hidden library scattered across their commanderies, secured behind coded architecture. While most of the collection was housed in France, deep within stone vaults protected by oaths and geometric locks, rumors persisted of other volumes being smuggled to Scotland, Portugal, and even Cyprus. What became of this library after the order was suppressed remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of Western esoteric history. Some theories suggest the Inquisition's agents burned the books, while others believe they were absorbed into the secret societies that formed in the following centuries. Still, many hold that a few of these volumes survive, hidden away in private collections or beneath ancient chapels, waiting for a day when their language can be deciphered once more. These books are said to contain knowledge predating Moses, wisdom passed down from antediluvian priest kings who understood the planet's energy grids and the soul's migration between realms. For those who remember the Templars' true mission, the library isn't lost, it is simply waiting. It waits for the right people to find it, those who possess the right lineage, the right inner silence, and the right mental geometry. Because within those pages lies not a myth, but a map charting the divine architecture that connects all things. The Templars didn't guard treasure, they guarded truth. And a truth once written can never be completely erased, only hidden, veiled until the time is right. This brings us to a peculiar Templar structure nestled in the quiet hills of central Italy. It's a stone edifice known by few and studied by even fewer, referred to in whispered circles as the Tower of Winds. At first glance, it appears as little more than a medieval watchtower, its stone facade worn by the elements and choked by creeping ivy. Yet, for anyone fluent in the language of sacred architecture, the tower's very form, dimensions, and placement on the landscape communicate an undeniable message. This isn't a structure designed for warfare or observation in the typical sense. Its alignment completely disregards military lookouts or trade routes. Instead, it is precisely oriented to the solstices, the equinoxes, and the celestial chart unfolding overhead. An octagonal foundation, a geometric form cherished by the Templars as a symbol for the passage between the terrestrial and celestial realms, serves as its base. Every one of its 8 faces corresponds to a cardinal or intercardinal point on the compass, a design choice that reflects both the ancient Hebrew understanding of Ezekiel's 4 winds and the Egyptian cosmological model of Horus's 4 suns. There's a symbol etched just above the entryway, carved with such faintness that it nearly disappears into the stonework, only revealing itself in the specific angle of the morning sun. It depicts a startling combination: the menorah blended with the Eye of Ra, with a pair of coiling snakes on either side. An image like this would have been seen as heretical by any other knightly brotherhood of the era. But the Templars had ventured far past the limits of conventional doctrine, deep into the core of ancient, lost knowledge. To them, these carvings weren't mere ornamentation, they were powerful statements of belief. Within the tower, a continuous spiral ramp ascends in place of stairs, leading one along a narrow passage. The walls are covered in inscriptions, now too weathered to be fully deciphered, but their arrangement and designs clearly correspond to recognized invocations for divine spirit and the powers of nature. At the very top, the final room is devoid of windows. Its only light source is a flawless circular aperture in the roof. On the spring equinox, at the precise moment of noon, a beam of sunlight lances through this opening to perfectly illuminate a sigil on the floor, a hexagram enclosed by a square, which is itself contained within a circle. This trio of geometric forms is a direct reflection of concepts from both Hebrew Merkaba mysticism and the sacred geometry of Egypt, strongly implying the Templars were actively safeguarding and fusing these 2 distinct traditions to create a unified, novel philosophy. So what exactly was the message they were embedding in this structure? It speaks of a cyclical concept of time, not a linear one. It declares that divinity cannot be contained by any single faith, and that the authentic languages of the sacred are breath, light, and geometry. Maybe the most profound point of all is that the wisdom of Solomon was a pursuit of cosmic harmony, not worldly conquest. This Tower of Winds was never intended for conflict. It was built to preserve memory. Think of it as a manuscript made of stone, a miniature temple designed to teach anyone who could interpret its symbols that truth operates in a circle, constantly coming back around and always concealed right before our eyes. Today, the tower's existence is known to only a handful of people, and its meaning is understood by even fewer. Yet for any who trace its spiraling path and stand in that central column of light, an inescapable question is posed by the very stones. The question isn't about who constructed it, but for what purpose. And the solution isn't found in any book, but rather in the whisper of the wind, in the deep silence, and in the play of shadows between sun and stone. This concept extends far beyond one tower. Dotted all across Europe's sacred geography, from Scotland's blustery highlands to the radiant valleys of Spain, you find Templar churches and strongholds. Their architectural plans defy the standard conventions of medieval building, instead adhering to a much more ancient and cosmic blueprint. When you plot these locations on a map and draw the lines between them, you realize they aren't marking land claims or commercial pathways. What they are actually doing is creating a mirror image of the heavens. For example, a specific grouping of chapels located in the south of France forms a perfect terrestrial map of the constellation Orion. Elsewhere, other sites replicate the distinct pattern of the Pleiades, the star cluster known as the Seven Sisters, which held deep reverence for ancient civilizations. This global reverence wasn't just a coincidence. It was the key to a map carved directly into stone, not inked onto a temporary scroll. After their secretive digs under Solomon's temple, the Templars emerged not with riches, but with a profound understanding. They brought back the knowledge that revived the sacred principle of as above, so below. They grasped a concept familiar to the master builders of Egypt and Sumer, that the location of a holy site was a matter of celestial resonance, not just convenient geography. The Templars sought to replicate these Startworth connections throughout Europe, knowing that the planet's energy currents, or ley lines, could be stimulated when structures were aligned with certain constellations. Imagine initiates gathering in the dead of night, standing silently under vaulted ceilings that mirrored the starscape above them. The very architecture, from pillars and arches to the placement of windows, was engineered not for simple beauty, but to capture and direct celestial light during key events like solstices and equinoxes. This focused light was then funneled into secret chambers, tucked away behind altars or deep within underground crypts. A stunning example of this is the Church of Vera Cruz in Segovia. This remarkable building was constructed with 12 sides, echoing the zodiac, and was perfectly oriented to the rising of Sirius, the star associated with rebirth and once known as the Eye of Isis. This begs the question, why was a Christian military order weaving pagan cosmology into its architecture? The answer is that they believed the truths written in the stars were older than any single religion. For them, the temple they vowed to guard wasn't just a building in Jerusalem, but a coded, resonant miniature of the entire universe. These star-aligned structures were far more than just architectural marvels. They functioned as initiatory grounds, powerful energy centers, and living textbooks. Their designs encoded prophecies, the great cycles of the cosmos, and the symbolic journey of the soul through the heavens. The Knights didn't worship the stars, they read them as a divine manuscript. They held that King Solomon had originally aligned his temple with Orion, just as the Great Pyramid was aligned with Sirius. By translating the sky into stone, they guaranteed their wisdom would outlast any scroll that could be turned to ash. These buildings are not simply ancient relics, they are deliberate messages. If you were to connect them on a map, a new constellation of purpose would emerge over the landscape of Europe. It's a quiet reflection of the same stars that once guided prophets and kings, now preserved by the guardians of a secret covenant, tucked away from the clamor of royal courts and official cathedrals. Deep within the stone walls of remote Templar fortresses, a different kind of authority convened, a council bound not by rank or rule, but by a sacred silence. Known to its members simply as the Council of Shadows, this inner circle was the genuine heart of the Templar mission, operating entirely beyond the sight of kings, popes, and even the vast majority of their own knights. Its members were not the celebrated leaders or visible representatives of the order. Instead, they were the quiet architects of its eternal purpose. Their gatherings were rare, occurring only under the new moon within circular, subterranean chambers aligned to the North Star and sealed by oaths that superseded any loyalty to Rome. The council's entire agenda, which was never written down or spoken of aloud, was dedicated to a single task: the preservation and transmission of Solomon's true legacy. This inheritance was not gold or a bloodline, but an entire body of knowledge, a sacred blueprint for divine civilization passed down through stone, ritual, and coded symbols. Each session began with the same rite, lighting a flame in a geometric brazier said to mirror the exact dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant. One by one, the members would then place their hands upon a slab carved with ancient script, reciting phrases in a tongue far older than Latin, believed to be either Phoenician or a dialect from pre-Babylonian priesthoods. In these secret meetings, they tracked the movement of scrolls and relics, debated the placement of future star-aligned commanderies, and recorded visions received during solitary meditations at Rosslyn, Chartres, or deep beneath Jerusalem. Instead of titles, each member carried a sigil, communicating across great distances using coded symbols carved into stones along pilgrimage routes or hidden within stained glass. Their decisions invisibly shaped the spiritual history of Europe. While popes appointed bishops and kings redrew borders, the Council of Shadows moved relics across continents, awakened dormant bloodlines, and chose who would receive the priceless fragments of Solomon's wisdom. It's even rumored they influenced the designs of Gothic cathedrals, guiding masons with whispered blueprints that traced the paths of divine light. As political pressures mounted, and the Church's gaze turned inward with suspicion, their meetings became less frequent but far more urgent. They knew a storm was coming, and that the scrolls and symbols had to be hidden in places the Vatican would never dream of looking. And so, the Council of Shadows transformed from a secret society into a grand strategy, a spiritual contingency plan set in motion centuries before its time. All that remains today is not the Council itself, but its fingerprint, left behind in stone, song, and silence. For those who know how to look, its message is clear. The light of Solomon's wisdom was never extinguished. It was simply buried, waiting to be uncovered not by an army, but by a seeker willing to step into the shadow. It is strange to think these figures once walked the earth, looking up at the same stars we do. If you are enjoying this journey through time so far, comment the word ancient, so I know you're still with me. A legend persists in the most hidden accounts of Templar history, telling of an artifact so profoundly sacred, its very existence held such world-altering potential that it was kept secret from all but the most trusted initiates. This was no mere cup, weapon, or fragment of wood. It was an ancient scroll of immeasurable power, identified simply as the relic of the Word. Whispers claimed this text was older than the Torah, more ancient than the Zohar, and even predated the holy inscriptions carried within the Ark of the Covenant itself. Decoded fragments, carefully preserved by the Council of Shadows, suggest the scroll held the very first sound, the precise vibrational equation that sparked the universe into being. This wasn't just a story or a symbol, it was the direct blueprint of cosmic design, written in glyphs that would reportedly warp and move before a reader's eyes. During their mysterious 9-year absence, the original Templar founders uncovered it deep beneath the Temple Mount. They located it, not in a physical room, but in a place they enigmatically called the void beneath the name, a domain protected from ordinary senses and secured by awareness alone. Upon its retrieval, the scroll was found encased in darkened wood, which was covered in symbols so alien that even the most learned members of the order could not decipher them. Anyone who dared to even attempt a reading was irrevocably changed, reporting whispers in absolute quiet, seeing its characters appear in their dreams, and feeling a strange intelligence observing them from within the text. The Templars, terrified of what such power could unleash, categorized the scroll as something more than a simple relic. It was a form of living knowledge, meant to be safeguarded rather than venerated. A prevailing belief is that it contained the true, original names of God, not the ones spoken in prayers, but the primordial names used to construct reality itself. These were words of power capable of summoning light or leveling entire cities. Its existence was a secret they fiercely kept from the Church, knowing it would be handing ultimate power to an institution that consistently chose control over genuine wisdom. Instead, the scroll was sealed inside a stone reliquary and hidden in a secret chamber, its location concealed within the coded language of Templar buildings. By its very nature, the artifact was said to be indestructible, meaning it could only ever be hidden away. It's even said their iconic red cross subtly incorporates the scroll's geometric formula, and that looking at specific stained glass windows during the solstice sun would reveal fleeting glimpses of its script. If the relic of the word survives to this day, it remains the most heavily protected secret the Templars ever possessed. The scroll's true function was never to instruct, but to serve as a profound reminder that our universe was born not from story, but from pure vibration. And for those capable of matching the scroll's own frequency, they would discover a power not for controlling creation, but for understanding it. This is because the essential truth was never lost, only hidden deep within every person. Beneath the Templars' public ceremonies, with their solemn vows and grand chants, existed a far more profound rite. This secret initiation, known as the ritual of the Third Veil, was conveyed not through speech, but through symbols, gestures, and silence. This was not for the average knight. The ritual was reserved for a select few, chosen by the inner circle to receive a transmission of power so ancient it predated Solomon's temple itself. It was said to be a perfect recreation of the sacred rites performed by Solomon's own priesthood within the Holy of Holies, a silent sanctum where the high priest entered only to listen. The Templars meticulously reconstructed this ceremony, using knowledge from their excavations and their contacts with Jewish mystics and Eastern masters. The process began with fasting, isolation, and silence, not with oaths. An initiate, stripped of all identity, would descend alone into a chamber beneath a commandery, a chamber aligned with celestial forces and carved with the sacred geometry of the original temple. Here, they would face the three veils, the illusions of time, identity, and perception. Passing through each one was a symbolic death. First, the candidate faced a black stone mirror that reflected not a face, but their fears and karmic history. Then, they walked between pillars of fire and water, reciting sacred names found under the Temple Mount that were never spoken publicly. Finally, in a chamber of breath, veiled masters would chant from vibrational scrolls. Each tone was designed to alter the initiate's personal frequency, breaking the last illusion of separation. Anyone who completed this ritual was transformed. No longer a knight, they became a guardian, a living vessel for Solomon's innermost teachings. They bore no special mark or title, but walked the world knowing that the true temple is within, that light and shadow are two sides of the same coin, and that the divine speaks in silence. Their identities were a profound secret, bound by a silence deeper than any vow. But subtle clues to their existence were left behind. Carvings of 3 concentric circles, a triangle with a veiled eye, and the rare image of Solomon with a finger to his lips instead of a crown. This passage, known as the ritual of the Third Veil, was never intended as a mere ceremony. It represented an irreversible crossing. For the knights who endured it, there was no returning to their former lives. They were transformed into guardians of an ancient flame, tasked not with setting the world ablaze, but with protecting its eternal glow. Among the countless records lost to fire and time, one voice flickers at the margins of Templar history. This Cistercian monk's name was deliberately erased from official chronologies, remembered now only by a title from veiled texts. The one who spoke. A prominent abbot, spurred by Vatican suspicion, sent him to observe the Templars stationed at a remote fortress nestled in the Pyrenees. For months, he adopted a humble facade, recording their daily routines and liturgies in the plain Latin expected of him. But what he found there defied everything he had been taught. By night, beyond the candlelit prayers and military drills, he witnessed gatherings that were not Christian by any measure he understood. He saw rituals in subterranean halls shaped like ancient sigils, heard songs in long-dead tongues, and watched circles form not around crucifixes, but around geometric stones that glowed under moonlight. At the center of it all stood a unique relic, a crystal sphere suspended in a gold lattice, pulsing with light in response to sound. Driven by a mixture of fear and a desperate need to reconcile this with his faith, the monk began a manuscript he titled Contra Illusio, meaning against the illusion. In its pages, he documented not just the rituals, but a philosophy gathered from the hushed conversations of senior knights. They spoke of divine resonance, of human bodies as temples of frequency, and of Christ not as a lone figure, but as a reawakening of a truth hidden since Solomon's time. Its final pages warned that the Templars weren't traditional heretics, but something far more threatening to the Church. A living conduit to knowledge that bypassed hierarchy, confession, and even Scripture itself. When he returned, he begged his superiors to read his findings, but he was imprisoned, declared insane, and his manuscript was ordered to be burned. Yet not all of it vanished. Before his capture, the monk had secretly passed several pages torn from the manuscript's center to a fellow scribe. These fragments resurfaced centuries later in an Austrian archduke's private collection, eventually making their way into the hidden Rosicrucian archives. The pages describe a ceremony called the Anointment of Silence, where an initiate drinks from a cup inscribed not with Latin but with inverted Hebrew. The ritual concludes with a phrase repeated 3 times, "Let the light be veiled." Modern scholars dismiss these pages as forgeries or Gnostic fables. Within Templar circles, however, the monk is remembered not as a traitor, but as a catalyst. A truth once spoken can never be entirely erased. It waits, buried beneath the ash, much like the monk's fragmented words, which still echo just beneath the surface of the history the Church tried to write. The common memory of the Knights Templar is one of swordsmen, bound by chivalry and esoteric knowledge. Yet this view overlooks a crucial fact. The transmission of their most protected secrets was not solely entrusted to armored men. An unseen and unrecorded lineage existed alongside them, a sacred and elusive sisterhood known as the Daughters of the Order. Their names were never etched in stone or recorded in papal decrees, but their movement through the Order's shadows was precise and purposeful. These women were not warriors in the conventional sense. They were guardians of memory, stewards of divine balance, and carriers of a wisdom too delicate for public ritual. Recruited from both noble bloodlines and mystic traditions, they were trained in silence, mathematics, celestial cycles, and the language of symbols. Some hailed from Sufi families, while others belonged to forgotten Jewish sects that had carefully preserved the feminine counterpart to Solomon's teachings. They embedded themselves in noble courts, serving as healers, scribes, and midwives. Each woman held only a fragment of the Templar code, a deliberate dispersal designed to ensure no single path could lead to the whole truth. While the knights rode to war, these women stayed back, concealing libraries beneath monasteries and encoding information into tapestries, icons, and stained glass. When kings became hostile and borders shifted, they were the ones who transported the precious scrolls. They disguised sacred rituals as lullabies, wove maps into their embroidery, and passed down prophecies in the form of fairy tales. Whispers from the hills of Provence tell of a convent where sunrise was marked not by prayers, but by sacred tones that mirrored the chants once heard under Solomon's temple. In Venice, a merchant's ledger revealed transactions by a woman identified only by a crescent star sigil, who was buying rare inks and ancient papyri, believed to be copies of scrolls from the lost library of Alexandria. Even Rosslyn Chapel, so often linked to the masculine Templar mysteries, features carvings of feminine figures unexplained by Christian doctrine, who hold keys, stars, and scrolls. These were not simply artistic flourishes, they were signatures. The Daughters of the Order preserved the harmony that the knights protected with their steel. They were the balance to the blade, the stillness that complemented the charge. And so, when the Order faced papal condemnation, when inquisitors burned libraries and knights broke under interrogation, it was these women who ensured the Order's soul endured. They fled into forests, joined underground mystery schools, and reappeared under new names. And even today, whispers persist of an unbroken lineage, a living thread waiting not for a call to war, but for a moment of collective remembrance. The true purpose of Solomon's order was never about preservation through brute force. It was about achieving a state of wholeness. This was a balance where the warrior's sword met the scholar's scroll, and where the long-suppressed sacred feminine could finally emerge into the light. That dream was shattered on a fateful Friday the 13th, a date whose dread echoes through history even if its origins are not always recalled. On this day, the Church initiated its brutal purge of the Templars. While the public accusations were for heresy, corruption, and blasphemy, these charges served only as a mask for a much deeper terror that lurked beneath the spectacle of show trials and the seizure of vast fortunes. What the Church truly feared was the secret the order protected, a secret buried deep beneath the Temple Mount. The Knights posed a unique danger, not with armies but with truth itself, a truth built from hidden knowledge, sacred geometry, forgotten rituals, and relics tied to a potential sacred bloodline. Their gold was a secondary concern, for while treasure can be confiscated, a revealed truth once unleashed is nearly impossible to suppress. As masters of secret architecture, ancient initiation rites, and guardians of hidden scrolls, the Templars had become the custodians of a heritage that predated Rome. The convenient charges of devil worship were simply a desperate disguise for a more urgent problem. The architects of the Inquisition could not risk confronting the reality that lay beneath Christianity's own foundations, the existence of vaults, scrolls, and a covenant far older than any pope. That night saw commanderies surrounded and libraries put to the torch. Knights were dragged into dungeons, where truth was abandoned in favor of confessions extracted through unimaginable pain and fear. But as the flames devoured priceless manuscripts, turning centuries of coded wisdom to ash, the Order's inner circle was already making its silent, calculated moves. This was the moment the Council of Shadows had long prepared for. A great dispersal began. The daughters of the Order smuggled sacred relics woven into tapestries, as inner guardians carried priceless fragments beneath their robes, disappearing into forests, mountain sanctuaries, and the shadows of remote monasteries. The knowledge, relics, and the sacred bloodline itself were scattered. Some journeyed north to Rosslyn, while others traveled east through Iberia, finding refuge with Sufi mystics. Still, more was encoded into the very fabric of cathedrals, hidden as elaborate memory devices within stained glass and Gothic designs, appearing merely decorative while awaiting a future rediscovery. This massacre was never just a grab for power. It was a deliberate act of suppression. Its true target wasn't soldiers who wielded blades, but guardians who carried the torch of forbidden wisdom. The Church's goal was to demolish the very architecture of memory itself. Yet knowledge has a way of slipping through the cracks. As the Inquisition marched on, the sacred geometries of Chartres and the cryptic diagrams from the Scroll of Fire endured. The statues of the Black Madonna survived. The initiation symbols, now sung only in silence, were passed down through generations of hidden women and renegade masons. So while the Order was officially erased from history, the covenant it guarded lived on, in fragments of stories, in the mysterious alignments of ancient stones, and in secrets of bloodlines whispered only in the dark. Instead of snuffing out Solomon's legacy, the attempt to destroy it had the opposite effect. It scattered the embers far and wide, ready to reignite not as a blaze, but as an act of remembrance. A wave of brutal persecution swept across Europe, and as the revered banners of the Templar Order were violently torn down, a profound quiet settled over the continent. This, however, was not the quiet of surrender. It was a calculated silence born of strategic retreat and meticulous concealment. Publicly, the world witnessed the harrowing spectacle of knights being captured, subjected to torture, and coerced into confessing fabricated crimes. Yet, behind this public drama, the true custodians of Solomon's ancient secret had already disappeared from view. They moved with the stealth of shadows, navigating forgotten byways and sacred routes understood only by initiates, their departure a far cry from a military retreat. One destination was Scotland, where the sanctuary of Rosslyn Chapel and its surrounding lands offered them a silent welcome, its very stones carved with their protective symbols. Another group found refuge across the Iberian Peninsula, where the shifting borders of the Reconquista had created secure enclaves within the kingdoms of Aragon and Portugal. In these new homes, they adopted new identities and emblems, re-establishing their presence as influential merchant guilds, pioneering naval orders, or unassuming architects. The inner circle, however, the dedicated guardians of the covenant and keepers of the Third Veil, did not end their journey in Europe. Following ancient prophecies known only to their Council of Shadows, their mission took them to regions far beyond the Vatican's influence. Whispers suggest some followed secret Phoenician sea charts, relics from Solomon's era, to chart a course westward toward lands spoken of long before Columbus. Others are said to have journeyed south, deep into the African continent, retracing the steps of ancient mystics. Meanwhile, tales from the East describe former Templars arriving in the Levant, not as warriors, but as seekers who assimilated into Sufi orders, trading their armor for simple robes and their swords for sacred scrolls. This was no panicked scattering, it was a purposeful dispersal. Every small contingent was entrusted with a single piece of the complete puzzle, a sacred relic, a priceless scroll, a complex code, or a protected lineage. The covenant itself was now partitioned for safety, but it remained unbroken. In every new land they settled, their legacy was encoded into the very structures they built. Temples hidden in plain sight as churches, doorways adorned with the Star of Solomon, and murals where divine truths were spoken through the language of geometry, always featuring the circle to represent the cycle of return and the belief that what was concealed would be rediscovered. Official history, dictated by the Church, pronounced the order extinct, while monarchs recast them as either treacherous villains or figures of pure myth. But in truth, this clandestine exodus was a mission of preservation, a great migration of memory itself. The profound wisdom once housed beneath Solomon's temple was now mobile, carried within men and women across the globe. History might have erased their names, but the descendants of these guardians would carry the very frequency of the covenant deep within their being, resonating in sacred sites aligned with the stars, in oral traditions more durable than books, and in bloodlines awaiting a future awakening. This was not an act of vanishing, but one of profound transformation. The guardians had not perished, they had simply become the substance of legend. And a legend, when it is truly remembered, has the power to become prophecy. The legend of the Holy Grail, so captivating in its mystery, it was never the real story. Instead, the Grail legend was a beautifully constructed cover, a poetic veil designed to hide a truth far more ancient and powerful. While medieval courts were captivated by tales of knights on grand quests for a sacred chalice, the authentic Templar legacy had absolutely nothing to do with a cup that supposedly held the blood of Christ. The true treasure they guarded wasn't an object of gold or glass. It was pure knowledge, meticulously preserved in stone carvings, architectural design, sacred geometry, and encoded languages. With its deep emotional resonance and universal appeal, the Grail myth served as the perfect decoy, offering a romantic narrative that was safe enough for the Church to permit. Yet, for the Order's inner circle, the Grail was understood as something infinitely more abstract and dangerous. It was a symbol for the transmission of a divine frequency, a secret of sacred design focused entirely on resurrection. This wasn't the resurrection of a person, however, but the rebirth of consciousness itself. The goal was to become the vessel, not to drink from one. The actual discovery beneath Solomon's temple was not a cup, but a codex of etched stone slabs, ancient instruments, and the possible remains of a civilization whose grasp of the universe would eclipse even our own. These were tools of alignment, built to harmonize space, time, and thought. To protect this profound power, the Templars let the world chase a fantasy. By the time the stories of Arthur and the Fisher King swept across Europe, the real guardians had already distributed this ancient knowledge. It was encrypted into the structure of Gothic cathedrals, encoded in the dimensions of hidden vaults, and woven into the rituals of secret societies. Every chapel with impossible acoustics, every window tracing the constellations, and every labyrinth with a hidden center were all fragments of the true Grail. While kings and treasure hunters squandered fortunes on golden cups, the truth was hiding in plain sight, completely misunderstood and dismissed. The myth succeeded because it is far safer to believe in a fairy tale than to confront the possibility that humanity's history is deeper, older, and has been more deliberately erased than we dare to imagine. The Church allowed the legend to flourish because it distracted everyone from what the Templars truly protected: the Covenant. This covenant was a state of consciousness, a powerful truth encoded within Solomon's legacy. Far from a symbol of sacrifice, the Red Cross was actually a map, and the Grail itself was never the true objective, but an elaborate cover story. The real secret continues to resonate even today, a quiet frequency humming just beneath the surface, eluding modern seekers who scour weathered stones for answers. The Grail's purpose was never discovery, it was remembrance. While the world was led to believe the Templars had been reduced to ash, their core mission was secretly reborn in a new country under a different name. Surviving members found a safe haven in Portugal, where King Denis offered them sanctuary from the Pope's authority. A royal decree quietly transformed the Templars into the Order of Christ, a new title that satisfied the Church but concealed an unaltered mission. Their enduring Red Cross was simply transferred to the sails of ships that would soon navigate uncharted seas. These voyages were not for conquest, but for the strategic dispersal and protection of the knowledge they guarded. This rebranding was a calculated move, not mere survival. Armed with a royal charter, new titles, and fresh vows, the Guardians of Solomon's Covenant entered an age of exploration and coded preservation. The Order of Christ became the unseen architects behind Portugal's Age of Discovery, embedding sacred geometry and symbols into the very vessels that mapped the globe. Their mastery of navigation was unparalleled, refined by ancient Hebrew texts and preserved Sufi cosmology. They were not searching for gold or fame. Instead, they sought unspoiled lands, places untouched by Rome's inquisitions where the Covenant could lie dormant and safe. Famed explorers, including Henry the Navigator, were not just royal visionaries. They were initiated stewards of this deeper purpose. Their training encompassed not only maritime skills, but also the esoteric rituals passed down directly from the founding 9 Knights. On their journeys, the order would weave encrypted symbols into colonial architecture and erect chapels aligned with celestial patterns. This careful planning guaranteed that Solomon's ancient design would continue its journey over the seas, marking a deliberate rebirth for the order. The nation of Portugal, despite its modest size in Europe, emerged as the vibrant new center for this secretive organization. Cities like Lisbon and Tamar acted as the very breath of the order, channeling ancient wisdom through fresh identities. Even their commissioned maps contained secret information, with lines of longitude charting not only the physical world, but also energetic pathways understood exclusively by initiates. Becoming the Order of Christ was not an abandonment of their original mission. Instead, it was a vast expansion of their duty, carrying it from the crypts of Jerusalem all the way to the watchtowers of Lisbon. Under the symbol of the Red Cross, their vigil persisted, protecting truths far too significant to be left in the hands of worldly empires. The inheritance from Solomon was no longer entombed, but was now taking to the high seas, its code embedded in ship sails, stone structures, and the very blood of its guardians. The Church, celebrating what it believed was the Templars' end, remained completely unaware that the order had simply transformed. Real influence, after all, doesn't require visibility to persist. It just needs to last. And there, in Portugal, it lasted in silence forever. Long before modern science would identify magnetic anomalies or ley lines, the Templars possessed something far more advanced. They had access to extraordinarily precise maps that charted the world's energy, not its political boundaries or commercial pathways. Tucked away in the depths of their commanderies were sacred maps of light, documents that unveiled an entirely unseen dimension of our planet. These scrolls detailed the flow of invisible power currents coursing through the globe, the planet's very life force, a concept understood by ancient mystics and woven into sacred landscapes since the time of Solomon. These were not ordinary maps. They were constructed with intricate layers of code and geometry that could only be deciphered by a properly trained and initiated observer. They pinpointed the exact energetic nodes where great cathedrals would later be built, identified intersections associated with miraculous events, and located convergence points perfect for amplifying the power of rituals. Crucially, the focus of these maps was never on cities, but on places of profound silence, isolated hills, ancient standing stones, and deep valleys where the planet's original creative energy remained pure. This was not a Templar discovery. This knowledge was an inheritance passed down from the Essenes, the priestly castes of Egypt, Sufi astronomers, and Hebrew scholars, who had all guarded the secrets of the fundamental grid that supports our reality. The Templars had a specific name for these energy lines, which they called the threads of divine accord. This incredible network of energy wove its way across Europe, linking together sacred locations. It stretched from the deep crypts of Rosslyn all the way to the high altar of Chartres, connecting sites like Montserrat and Tamar, and even reaching shores discovered much later in the Age of Discovery. Instead of choosing locations based on convenience, the Knights followed the dictates of these lines. Every structure they raised, whether a major commandery, a grand temple, or a humble chapel, was built with an almost fanatical level of precision. This meticulous construction ensured their buildings were in harmony with both cosmic events in the heavens and the subtle frequencies emanating from the planet itself. The Templars firmly believed that without a physical anchor, powerful knowledge could become unstable and dangerous. This led them to embed their secret maps directly into their architecture, using the design of spiral staircases, the application of sacred ratios, and the intricate geometry of their famous rose windows. However, access to the complete maps of light was a privilege reserved for a very small, elite group within the order. It was only after passing through the most secret levels of initiation that a knight would be shown the full codex, typically revealed in pieces passed down from one master to the next, and always bound by an unbreakable oath that held power even beyond the grave. The purpose of these maps extended far beyond simple navigation. They were, in fact, keys designed for activation, intended for use only at precise moments of celestial alignment when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grew thin. The Church, oblivious to the map's very existence, wrote off the strategic placement of Templar sites as mere superstition or happy coincidence. Yet the initiates understood that these locations were nodes in a living energetic circuit, forming a massive altar that spanned the continent, built to align human consciousness with a divine cosmic plan. When someone taps into this network, whether by pure intuition or through a legacy passed down, they aren't just uncovering old geography. They are stepping into a timeless current where history and prophecy become indistinguishable. For hundreds of years, rumors have swirled through secret halls of power, suggesting that not everyone inside the Vatican shares the same agenda. It's believed that hidden among the many cardinals, theologians, and archivists is a secret faction whose job is to intercept forbidden knowledge, not interpret it. Referred to only in coded language as the Custodes Umbri or the Keepers of Shadow, this group is thought to consist of silent observers. Their sole mission is to prevent any revival of the sacred knowledge once held by the Templars. However, their methods are far from the public spectacles of inquisitors. These watchers don't rely on overt force like fire and outright condemnation. Their methods are far more discreet, involving redacted manuscripts, disappearing relics, sealed-off libraries, and the professional ruin of inquisitive scholars. The source of their power is not confrontation, but the careful containment of knowledge. Far from public view, deep within the Vatican's secret collections exist unlabeled vaults. These chambers house scrolls bound in strange fabrics, items etched with symbols from pre-Latin languages, and books that almost seem to vibrate with a tangible presence. Many believe these vaults hold artifacts the Vatican can neither destroy nor release. Maps of the Temple Mount, fragments of the Scroll of Fire, and correspondence between Templar masters and mystics whose names have been deliberately erased from church history. The Watchers are aware of the complete truth. They know the Templar order survived, that Solomon's covenant was just hidden, not broken, and that the architectural patterns in great cathedrals are functional, not just decorative. Understanding this geometry of power, they know the order's knowledge could fundamentally reshape doctrine. So their vigilance targets not heresy in the pews, but the very memory embedded within the stones. If a researcher gets too close, they are quietly steered elsewhere, their funding vanishes, and their reputation is ruined. When a relic appears, it's either bought before auction or it simply disappears while in transit. On occasion, a whistleblower might claim to have seen a coded map, a Templar artifact, or a scroll with the 9 names. These voices are never met with violence but are surgically discredited and dismissed as fringe, erased by a carefully manufactured cloud of doubt. These Watchers are patient, believing time is on their side. Yet, the Templars saw time as cyclical, not linear. This means the knowledge resurfaces every few generations, and the great cycle begins anew. The Vatican's true fear is not rebellion but revelation. It's not that people will lose faith, but that they will find a different one where they see the code behind the cross, the stone behind the chalice, and the covenant beyond the church. So, the Vatican's eyes search not just for those who remember, but for those who are awakening. After all, a mind that has been illuminated can never be made dark again. And so the Watchers wait, protecting secrets they cannot voice, aware the silence is growing fragile and that the truth never truly rests. Meanwhile, the Order's guardians have never ceased their own hidden work. Deep within Vatican City, past reinforced stone and watchful guards, lies an archive spoken of only in hushed tones. This chamber is so secret it's missing from all official records, blueprints, and digital registries. Known among initiates as the Sententum Vault, it is said to hold the most dangerous documents ever to be brought within the Vatican's walls. These are not some heretical gospels or ancient philosophical scrolls, but actual relics unearthed by the Templars from beneath Solomon's temple. Some believe these artifacts are original writings predating even the Pentateuch, bearing the seals of ancient priesthoods and holding truths that could shake the foundations of 3 major religions. Sealed by a papal decree during the final days of the Templar trials, the vault was intended to remain closed forever, inaccessible to historians and even future popes. Whispers of its contents speak of copper scrolls, leather codices wrapped in ancient linen, and a single stone tablet etched with geometric patterns from no known tradition. Those who dare to request access receive not a denial, but absolute silence. Even the Vatican's top scholars only have fragmented knowledge, passed along in unconfirmed riddles. Its very existence is a paradox of no official acknowledgement matched by constant internal vigilance. Persistent rumors tell of cardinals who challenge the vault's seal, only to be reassigned or simply disappear. But why such secrecy? Because the contents don't just challenge doctrine, they provide a blueprint for an entirely different view of divinity itself. If the scrolls exist, their cosmology suggests humanity is not fallen but forgotten, and that the divine spark is an inheritance, not a gift. The original 9 Templars allegedly found these texts buried deep in the earth, shielded by time and preserved by ritual, not stored in any library. Modern linguistics can't decipher their language, a mix of Hebrew, Proto-Aramaic, and an unknown symbolic script. Only the initiated, it is said, can perceive its true meaning. This archive remains locked not to prevent physical danger, but to protect the very structure of belief. For if the world learned its spiritual traditions were founded on texts older than Scripture, guarded by an order condemned as heretical, it would fracture not just faith, but the very systems that rely on it. The Templars didn't lose these scrolls, they delivered them. And the Church, in a move both cautious and cunning, hid them where only initiates would ever know to look, in silence, in shadow, and in stone. The archive that never opens is more than a room. It is a decision, a line drawn not in ink but in secrecy. And until that key is turned, the question remains, What truth lies waiting just beyond the lock? It was never just about the past. From the shattered stones beneath Jerusalem to the hidden chambers beneath European cathedrals, the trail of the Templars does not end in flame or silence. It continues, woven into myths, encrypted in geometry, and in symbols etched upon the walls of forgotten places. Instead of vanishing, the Order of Solomon merely transformed its appearance. It cast off its armor to move unseen and traded its swords for the pursuit of wisdom. The inheritance resurfaces through the ages, not as a formal organization, but as a subtle frequency, an awakening that resonates with artists, scholars, mystics, and seekers of truth. Its signature can be found hidden within the imagery of Renaissance masterpieces, in the celestial precision of great cathedrals, and within the very design of Masonic structures built to safeguard a message rather than for profit. Ceremonies believed to be long lost are still conducted in secluded groups, far from the view of the modern world. There are even rumors that the sacred bloodline continues, flowing through individuals who are unaware of their heritage, protected by secret promises instead of royal decrees. Solomon's core understanding, his mastery over the material and spiritual realms, and his connection to energies outside of established doctrine, was never lost to the grave or destroyed in the ruin of temples. It was placed in the care of guardians who knew that authority lacking a higher goal leads to corruption, and that sacred truth revealed openly can be profaned. This is why the order stays in the shadows, not from cowardice but from a practical need. In a reality governed by surface-level perceptions, genuine truth finds its safest shelter in symbols, narratives, and the passage of time. Their objective has never been control, only remembrance. At pivotal moments, when humanity drifts towards amnesia, ripples from the order's existence surface once more. This might take the form of an ancient manuscript unearthed from the desert, a grand cathedral that unveils its celestial map, or a lineage that traces its roots to a forgotten promise made in Solomon's time. This isn't a work of fiction, it's the hidden counterpart to recorded history. While the Order of Solomon no longer marches under a flag, its guiding light has never been extinguished. You can feel its presence in unresolved questions, in ceremonies practiced in silence, and behind the doors of sealed archives. Maybe this is what true immortality looks like, endurance achieved not through power, but through enduring mystery. History may say the Templars are gone, the Church might issue denials, and academics can debate endlessly, yet the symbols persist, the sacred geometry holds its form, and the bloodline continues to flow. In this way, the inheritance thrives, asking not to be discovered but to be remembered. For the ultimate secret of Solomon was not contained in his constructions, but in his comprehension. He knew that the most sacred truths must be concealed in full view, patiently awaiting the few with the perception to see and the intuition to listen, always present in silence, in shadow, and eternally in stone. We have reached the edge of the map for tonight. The archives of Mythic Index are closing, but the history remains. If this journey offered you rest or realization, please leave a like before you go. Comment which era or myth you wish to explore in our next session, and subscribe to ensure the library doors are open for you again.